Andiwal, salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laiq Siddiqui, the father of Holophase, the silent ground. The question that answers itself. We have reached the edge of what can be asked without smuggling. In part 27, we went all the way down. We stripped reality until there was nothing left to strip. No objects, no stories, no meanings, no structures we could point to. Only the capacity for this to be different from that. Only the permission for any distinction to exist at all. That permission is phi. Now the mind does what the mind always does at the edge. It looks over the cliff and asks the biggest question it knows how to form. Why is there something rather than nothing? Or in our language, why is there phi rather than not phi? This question feels like the crown of all questions, the final door, the deepest mystery. People have spent lifetimes circling it. They have built temples around it. They have written libraries around it. Part 28 exists to do something very strict and very freeing. It will not answer the question the way people expect. It will show you something sharper. The question already uses phi, so it cannot get behind phi to explain phi. Or in the simplest sentence possible, the question contains its own answer. Not because we are clever, not because we found a hidden trick, but because the act of asking already stands on the very ground it is trying to explain. This is not an insult to wonder. It is a correction of posture. It is the firewall doing its job. Because a firewall is not a cage, it is a purifier. It protects your thinking from smuggling, especially when the question is so big that you are tempted to accept any answer that feels comforting. So we proceed carefully. The firewall again, cleanly. One primitive, phi, not matter, not mind, not time, not space, not energy, not mathematics, not God, not being. Just the permission for distinction, the ability for this to ever differ from that. In this part, we do not smuggle. A hidden cause behind phi. A deeper thing that produced phi. A cosmic purpose that required phi. A metaphysical substance called existence. We do not turn phi into a character with motives. We do not treat phi like a machine that runs. We treat phi as the condition for any statement, any explanation, any machine, any motive, any why. And that means, if we ask a why that secretly assumes phi, we must admit that the question is not a normal question. That is where we begin. The simplest demonstration, language asking about language. Take the big question and shrink it until you can hold it in your hand. Ask, why is there language rather than no language? It sounds reasonable. Language exists. It could have not existed. Why does it exist? But look at what you are doing when you ask it. You are using language to ask about language. You are standing on the floor and asking why there is a floor, while your feet are still on it. If language truly did not exist in any form, no words, no symbols, no gestures, no shared signs, then the question could not even be formed. You could not request an answer. You could not recognize one. You could not distinguish answer from noise. So the very fact that the question is asked already proves something. Language exists. Not as a philosophical claim, as an operational fact. The act is happening. This does not mean language is self-created or unexplained. It means something subtler. The question, why language, is not a question that can step outside language to judge language. Any attempt to step outside still uses something language-like: symbols, distinctions, comparisons. And here's the critical move. Phi is more basic than language. Language is one of the things that happens inside Phi. Language is a sophisticated pattern of distinctions. So when you ask, why phi rather than not phi? You're doing the same thing at a deeper level. You're using distinction to ask why distinction exists. You're using phi to ask why phi exists. That is the circle. The question, why are we asking questions? Now make it even more personal. Forget philosophy. Look at your own mind right now. Ask, why are we asking questions rather than not asking? Notice what happens. The moment you ask it, you have already demonstrated the thing you are asking about. You are asking a question. So the question has a strange property. It answers itself by being asked. It doesn't answer itself with a sentence like, because. It answers itself with a fact. The act is occurring. This is not a trick. This is structure. The ability to ask depends on the ability to distinguish. Question versus no question. Sense versus nonsense. Possible versus impossible. True versus false. Something versus nothing. All of that is phi at work. So when you ask the ultimate question, the fact that it can be asked is already a demonstration. There is something. Because the asking is something. The distinction is something. The comparison is something. You might reply, but that doesn't tell me why. Exactly, because why is a kind of demand that functions inside the world of distinctions. Why assumes a framework where explanations can be compared, evaluated, accepted, or rejected. And that framework is phi. So the demand cannot get behind the framework. The weaver asking why patterns while pointing at a pattern. Now I return to the factory beneath hell because it holds the simplest versions of these ideas. Imagine a moment. Your hands are tying knots. Your eyes are tracking the design. Your mind is holding the pattern in place like a fragile lantern. And then a thought rises, almost like a whisper. Why are there patterns rather than no patterns? It feels like a deep question. But notice the obvious fact that hides in plain sight. You ask it while recognizing a pattern. You ask it while pointing at a pattern. You ask it using pattern recognition. The question is not outside the world of patterns. The question is itself a pattern, a structured arrangement of concepts. It is made of distinctions, pattern versus no pattern, there is versus there is not, why versus no why. So the question cannot be above pattern. It is a pattern asking about pattern. This is what part 28 means when it says, the question contains its own answer. The answer is not a sentence. The answer is the fact that the question is a patterned act inside a patterned world. The mirror that asks why it reflects. Part 26 gave us the mirror. A mirror does not intend to reflect. It simply reflects when light interacts with it. Now imagine the mirror could ask, why do I reflect rather than not reflect? The question is absurd, not because curiosity is bad, but because the mirror is not the kind of thing that can ask. To ask is to have a system of distinctions. I reflect rather than why. But let's pretend it could ask. Even then, the act of asking would already assume the mirror exists as something that can distinguish. The question would presuppose what it is asking about. Now replace mirror with phi. Phi is not a mind. It is not a chooser. It does not intend. It does not ask. It is the permission for distinctions, not an agent who uses them. So, why is there fee? Is like imagining the mirror asking why it reflects. The question tries to turn the permission into a person. It tries to make the ground into a character. That is smuggling. The firewall says, do not do that. Two kinds of why. Now we make the distinction that saves us from confusion. There are two kinds of why. Type 1. Why inside the world? These are questions like, why did the glass break? Why did the bread rise? Why is the traffic heavy? Why did the patient get better? Why does the moon orbit the Earth? These why questions work because the framework is already there. You can compare causes, you can test explanations, you can run trials, you can repeat, you can fail and revise. These why questions are the engine of science and everyday life. They are valuable. They are answerable because they operate inside phi, inside comparability. Type 2. Why about the framework itself? These are questions like, why is there comparability at all? Why is there explanation rather than no explanation? Why is there something rather than nothing? These questions are not wrong. They are simply a different category. They try to step outside the very floor that makes stepping possible. They try to ask for an explanation of explanation. But explanation is itself a process of comparison. This explanation fits better than that. This predicts, that fails. This is coherent, that contradicts. This survives tests, that collapses. So any answer to type 2 questions must already use type 1 machinery. Comparisons, distinctions, evaluation, and therefore must already assume phi. That is the structural trap. The prediction, firewalled, operational. Holophase doesn't just give vibes, it gives predictions. Here is the prediction of part 28. Every attempted answer to why something rather than nothing will either 1. Use phi, comparability, and become circular, or 2. Avoid phi and become incomprehensible. Not shareable, not checkable, not an answer in any public sense. Let's test this prediction against the kinds of answers people usually give. Answer attempt 1. Because God created something. That is an answer inside a framework of distinctions. God versus not God. Created versus not created. Chose versus did not choose. True versus false. You can argue about it. You can compare doctrines. You can defend it. You can reject it. All of that uses phi. So it may be meaningful to some. But as an answer to why phi exists, it is circular. It assumes the very comparability it tries to ground. Answer attempt 2. Because quantum fluctuations produce something from nothing. Even if the physics is correct in some domain, notice what happens. You distinguish quantum vacuum from nothing. You treat fluctuation as a describable event. You compare theories and evidence. You are already inside the world of distinctions. So again, phi is presupposed. Answer attempt 3. Because mathematics requires it. But mathematics is itself a pattern language built on distinctions. Numbers require distinguishable units. Equality requires comparability. Proof requires rule-following distinctions. So this answer uses phi too. And now the other branch. Answer attempt 4. No answer. Silence. Silence avoids the circle. but it doesn't function as an explanation. It cannot be publicly compared as correct versus incorrect. It might be a spiritual practice. It might be beautiful. But as a public answer to the question, it is not an answer. So the prediction stands. Anything that counts as an answer will use phi. Anything that avoids phi will not count as an answer. This is not arrogance. It is a structural constraint. The falsification. Real, strict, not symbolic. A firewall also demands a way to die. Here is what would falsify part 28. Provide an answer to why something rather than nothing that does not use comparability. No distinguishing something from nothing. No language that contrasts possibilities. No evaluation of better versus worse. No claim that your answer differs from non-answer. In plain terms, answer the question without using the very tools that make answers possible. If someone can do that, if they can give a public, shareable, checkable answer that does not use phi, then part 28 fails. This is a strong falsification. It is not a trick. It is simply honest about what the claim is. And yes, it is extremely hard. But hard is not the same as impossible. Holophase does not ban miracles. It simply states what must happen to count as a miracle here. The child's why chain, where why breaks. You've seen this in ordinary life. A child asks, why is the sky blue? Because light scatters. Why does it scatter? Because of molecules and wavelengths. Why molecules? Because atoms. Why atoms? Because quantum rules. Why quantum rules? Because that's how the world behaves. And then the child asks the final jump. Why is there a world that behaves at all? That jump feels like it's just one more why, but it's not. It changes category. All the earlier why questions asked for comparisons inside the world. This condition leads to that outcome. This mechanism explains that effect. The last question asks for the condition that makes condition outcome talk possible at all. And the moment you try to answer it, you're already doing what the earlier questions required, using distinctions, explanations, comparisons. So the child is not wrong. The child has simply reached the edge where why no longer functions the same way. Part 28 is the adult version of that moment, without pretending it can be solved by louder words. The hidden piece, not an answer, a recognition. Now we say something careful. Part 28 does not tell you, stop asking. It tells you, know what kind of question you're asking. When you ask why something rather than nothing, you're not asking for a normal cause like, why did the glass break? You are confronting the fact that any cause, any explanation, any reason, any why already lives inside phi. So what is the answer, if not a cause, behind phi? The answer is the recognition. The asking itself is the demonstration. The fact that you can ask means distinctions exist, comparisons exist, coherence can exist, explanation exists as a practice. That is the something, not as a theory, as a lived fact. This does not solve suffering. It does not explain the cosmos like a diagram, but it cleans the foundation. And cleaning the foundation is exactly what episode 13a is doing. A rapid string of analogies to make it stick. Let me hit the idea with a few everyday images so it becomes bone deep. The flashlight asking, why is there light while shining? The shining is the proof that light is present. Any explanation you give uses the light. The map asking, why is there mapping while being read? Reading a map presupposes the possibility of correspondence, of matching, of comparison. The calculator asking, why is there calculation while outputting? Calculation presupposes distinguishable symbols and operations. The judge asking, why is there justice while evaluating evidence? Justice, as a public practice, is built from comparison, claim versus evidence, promise versus record. The weaver asking, why is there pattern while tying knots? The question is woven from the same thread as the work. In each case, the act demonstrates the ground. So with phi, the fact that we can even form the distinction something versus nothing means we are already in the something. We are already inside comparability. What part 28 does not claim? Negative firewall. To stay clean, we must state what we are not saying. Part 28 is not claiming there is no mystery, philosophy is useless, science can't answer anything, the question is stupid, Holophase has solved existence. No, part 28 is claiming something narrower and more precise. Asking for a cause behind phi is a category error, because any cause talk presupposes phi. That is all. It's like saying, you cannot use your own eyes to look at your own eyes directly. That doesn't make eyes unreal. It makes the attempt structurally limited. And that's a healthy limit. It stops delusion. The memory hook. The one sentence. Here is the sentence to carry. The question contains its own answer. Or even shorter. You can't ask behind phi without using phi. If you remember that, you will stop being hypnotized by grand-sounding ultimate answers that smuggle in hidden assumptions. You will also stop being ashamed of wondering. You will just wonder with cleaner hands. The bridge forward. Why part 29 must exist. Now we stand at a practical problem. If the ultimate why question collapses into self-presupposition, then the mind will try something else. It will say, fine, if phi can't be explained, then phi must be energy. Or phi must be consciousness. Or phi must be mathematics. Or phi must be God. Or phi must be the universe's purpose. That is the next temptation, smuggling. So part 29 must arrive as the discipline of boundaries. The negative seal, what phi is not. Because when you cannot prove the ground from something deeper, the only way to keep the ground clean is to prevent false additions. You protect the foundation by refusing illegal imports. That is what comes next. But for now, we end part 28 with the calmest possible truth. The question, why something rather than nothing, feels like the final door. But it is not a door. It is a mirror. It reflects the fact that you are already standing in the condition you are asking about. The condition of distinction, the condition of comparability, the condition of phi. You are not outside existence looking in. You are inside comparability, using comparability, wondering about comparability. And that lived act, this very act of asking, is not a problem to be solved behind the world. It is the world showing itself as readable. Always peace be upon you.